Don't worry, Daniel Masterson will come up, but he will be more of a guest star. We will focus a little bit more on another Daniel who was the victim of some pretty shocking prison violence. And even for prison, this is pretty extraordinary. And this is YouTube, so I have to be careful. But essentially, what happened is Daniel, who was near the end of his sentence, very young kid, and was locked away for theft, and just was kidnapped, beaten, and I will try to be sensitive here, violated for several days. But the warden, who is completely corrupt and very ironically called Headley, yes, he is called Headley. If you don't get the joke, he may be a distant cousin. That would be pretty shocking if Claire and the other Headley are family. And yeah, that guy looks literally like Hitler, but just more fat and ugly and a little bit older. So, shocker, the Alabama system is insanely corrupt, and Headley just looked the other way while this inmate, who has a very, very long history of doing these kinds of things, just did it again and went really, really excessively punishing and hurting this kid who died. And the prison tried to say he died of a drug overdose. So it's just a very, very big mess. And the family is struggling just to pay for his funeral. Apparently, they've done 33,000, the 50,000 they need just to bury Daniel. So it's a very tragic situation. But it does bring into sharp focus the dilemma with the other Daniel, where, gotta be honest, a lot of people are salivating that Mr. Masterson will experience some, I guess we're going to call them Derek issues in prison. And I'm working on a video where it may not be as people think with Masterson and that what will happen in prison. But I can't lie, I am also somewhat, I don't want to say excited, but I am observing closely whether Daniel Masterson will be, I don't want to say hurt. I guess you want to say he will experience problems given the severity of his crimes. And again, we're stuck with the dilemma that the people punishing these other inmates are not necessarily good people themselves. In fact, the Daniel case in Alabama really forces us to examine this because apparently the inmate also had a long history that, well, basically very close to Masterson. Namely, he's also very Scientology esque in his own way. So it's a very, very tricky situation where, on the one hand, yes, we should not want prisoners to have violence visited upon them beyond their crimes. On the other hand, if it happens, usually most people are not too sad. I'm not too sad that Derek is experiencing some problems. Obviously, the stabbings he was inflicted upon, I think, were excessive. However, am I sad that he's experiencing problems in prison beyond his sentence? No, not really. I don't really cry for Derek, and I probably will not cry for Daniel Masterson. But then the problem becomes that's how this stuff keeps happening, that nobody cares what happens to the inmates. So when something really awful happens, like with Daniel in Alabama, we just lump these people together. That we just have a bad system overall. And if you compare it to Norway, it's insane. Norway has almost zero crimes, zero murders. Their problems are just so much smaller than the US. But I will say, even though I am on the left, there is also the argument that we're not using the death penalty enough. Because clearly, in some cases, the death penalty is the right decision. It's not an easy thing to give the state that power, but in some cases, you really don't have an alternative. It doesn't seem viable to rehabilitate certain people. So it seems both the right wing and left wing need to be more serious about reforming the system. Nothing will happen overnight, but yeah, we got to start having these conversations where clearly the system as a whole is corrupt. And although it is fun, and I can't lie, it's a little bit satisfying that certain people you don't like who finally get sent to prison get extra punishment. It's not just going to be them. A lot of less severe cases are going to be caught up in this maelstrom. So it's just a very, very tricky situation all around. So it's a very tragic situation for Daniel in Alabama and his family. But again, if we want reform, we're going to have to look at more systemic reforms to sort of prevent this from happening in the future. But it is a very sad situation all around.